All right, so I'm on the phone with Coach Joe Dominguez. Coach, what's going on, man?
Not much. I'm doing real good. Sure is nice to hear from you all the time.
Yeah, it was I think it's a little bit easier catching up with Barack Obama than it was to find you, man. I done went through a lot of sources to get your phone number, man.
I'm a busy guy.
I hear you. So look, I wanted to just to kind of restate this and preface this. The reason why I'm calling you is like like I say, I'm real big on telling people thank you. And like I always say, giving people their roses while they still here. And, I had did a series when my daughter's only 3. I'm old. So I had my first daughter and I had did like a little series where, I called my mom and dad and my wife's parents and aunts and uncles and just had them kind of tell their story. And I was like, man, if something should ever happen to them, I would want them to tell their story to my daughter in their own voice. You know what I mean? So people, it's just more powerful. And I learned a lot doing that. And then, after doing that and listening to those interviews, I start thinking about, where I am with my life and, the level of success that I've been able to have. And I start thinking about the people that impacted my life, you know what I mean? And kind of guided me on this course. And, I mean, really, 1 and 2 is not bad. I mean, you're the second person. I thought about my T-ball coach. He started coaching me when I was 7. And then I thought about the impact that, you had on coming through that program at Banning and what you guys put together. So that's the whole purpose of this thing is just to kind of, get some information. And if anybody ever wants to know kind of how I'm made up, they can hear my parents and then they can hear some of the men and women that I took things from, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to have a conversation with you and ask you some questions.
Well, let me start by saying that what I think you're doing is a great. I think I might even follow up on something like that. I've got a son who's 29, but I don't really share much with him about what I used to do. It's been so long since I got out of coaching, and he was really young when I was coaching. So I think I've got to do the same thing, share some of that.
Well, let me ask you this. So when you my first year at Banning, I got there and actually I don't even want to start at Banning, man. I want to start with you. So did you go to Banning?
I went to Banning. I grew up in Wilmington. I grew up about a half a block from Banning High School.
Okay.
And the elementary school I went to was maybe a half a mile away. So every day after school, I would walk home and I'd cut across through the high school after school and I'd stop and watch football practice. And then I'd hop the fence after about 20 minutes and go home. And I kept doing that every day. And, I started out maybe at the age of 9 or 10 as a water boy there at Banning. So that
Who
was kind of my first
who
introduction to
was
football.
coaching when you was the water boy?
Uh, Coach Hebner, Paul Hebner, and Gene Volnagel, the two coaches that you played against at Carson.
I never knew Von Nagel coached at Banning.
Yeah, that was before they built Carson High School. All the students that went to Carson during your era, they would have went to Banning. There wasn't a school there, so all those kids would have went to Banning. So when they built Carson, I believe it was around maybe 63 or 64. Volnagel went over to Banning. Over to Carson, and Paul Hebner stayed at Banning.
So yeah, so then back then during those years was Banning, if all that talent was going to one school, were they like a powerhouse then when you were growing
Well,
up?
I think in the late 50s they'd won a city championship, and again in the early 60s they'd won a city championship. And then the school just couldn't hold that many students, so then they built Carson High School. And I'm going to guess around 1963 or 1964. So they built Carson High School, and Volnagel went over to Carson. And what they did was all the students from Banning that lived out that way went over to Carson. But if you were a senior, you could stay at Banning. If you're a sophomore and junior and you lived in that area, you went over to Carson. So Carson struggled for a couple of years because they didn't have any like senior leadership and all that. And I think about 3 years later they'd won a city championship, went undefeated, and won a city championship
Really?
with a with a real good football team. Yeah. So the guy that stayed on as the head coach at Banning was Paul Hebner, and I played for him my junior year. And we weren't, like I said, we weren't very good, and they fired him. And then he went over to Carson and teamed up again with Volnagel. And Ferragamo was the B coach, and they hired him as the head coach.
Okay. So then, what you played? What, 2 years for Ferragamo?
Yeah, I played my 10th grade year as a B for Ferragamo at quarterback. And my junior year, I played for Hebner on the varsity at quarterback. And my senior year, I got bumped from quarterback because that's when Vince Ferragamo came to Banning.
Ah, so he took your
Yeah,
spot,
so
man.
I didn't even get a chance to compete for it. They just said, "Hey, you got to find another position."
All
So
right.
I ended up playing wide receiver and defensive back, and I returned punts and kickoffs.
Now, what kind of what were y'all running? Were y'all throwing the ball back then, or what
Oh
type of offense were you guys running?
well, when I played bees, we were running really a conventional T formation team. We ran a little, isolation play inside and a little off tackle power to sweep. And if we threw the ball more than 10 times, that meant we were in trouble. But we were a good team. My B team, we went undefeated. We had a good B team. Then my junior year, I went up to varsity. We only won 4 games, and we ran, almost like every week we switched offenses because nothing was ever working.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and then my senior year, we went to more of a pro style attack because Vince Ferragamo was there, and he was a talented 10th grader. You could tell he was going to go somewhere. He was already 6'3" or 6'4", had a lot of talent. So we same thing, ran a little isolation play, off tackle sweep, but we threw the ball a lot that year.
Now,
And
is he Coach Ferragamo son, or they just
no, it's his youngest brother.
okay? And so they lived in the district, and he was supposed to go to Banning, or he just kind of ended up there.
Oh no, when Banning was originally built, it was built right on Avalon Boulevard, where it is today. But the next street over, Broad Avenue, used to go all the way through. So when in the early '70s, when we had an earthquake, they condemned the main building at Banning, and they bought out all those homes across the street on Broad. They bought that whole city block out, and that's where they built the new main building. And that's where Ferragamo's family lived, right on that block. He only lived virtually across the street from the old school. So Vince and Ferragamo, they grew up right in Wilmington. You could throw a rock from his house and hit the school.
Right. All right. So then, you graduated, and then what? You started teaching or coaching, or when did you start coaching?
Well, I went to Harvard College for a couple of years and played a little bit of football there, but I was small and I wasn't very good. And then I transferred from Harvard College over to Cal State Dominguez, and I was working on my degree, and I thought maybe I'd want to get into teaching. And one of the guys I went to high school with, probably my junior year in college, he was volunteering his time coaching the B team with a head coach there. Was Frank named Frank Carrito? I don't know if he was there when you were there, Mr. Carrito.
His name doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, well, he was the head coach. So they were looking for another coach. So my buddy Ed said, "Hey, Joe, you want to coach?" I go, "Yeah, that's what I want to get into." So my junior year in college, I was going to Cal State Dominguez. I was coaching afternoons B football, and I was, oh heck, maybe 21,
Mm-hmm.
and the head coach hired me, and he said, "You're the offensive coordinator, and I want you to coach the quarterbacks, receivers, and defensive backs." I said,
What year was
"I'll."
this?
1973.
Okay, I was one.
Nin- 1973,
Okay.
and we went something like 5-5.
Okay.
And then in '74, the same three of us coached the B team, and we went undefeated.
Yeah.
Had a real good team. We had Joey Montiel and Reggie Williams, Ronnie Settles. We had a great B team. Okay, and that was in '74. And then in '75, the offensive coordinator on the varsity level got a head coaching job out in Covina, and there was an opening. And Ferragamo asked me, "You want to coach varsity football?" And I said, "Yeah." So my first year on the varsity level was in 1975. I coached the quarterbacks, receivers, and defensive backs, but I was not the offensive coordinator. Ferragamo was the offensive coordinator. And you remember a guy named Ed Pacuba, Mr. Pacuba? I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure he
Yep.
was.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and he was coaching there, and he was the defensive coordinator.
How,
So I
how come
just
y'all
coached.
was coaching so many positions? It just weren't a lot of coaches, or that's just what y'all
No,
did
back
back
then
then?
there weren't a lot of coaches. No, 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 heck no, no. That you maybe had 3, 4, 5 at the most. You just pulled double duty on everything. So that was
Was y'all
75.
getting paid double?
Oh heck no, 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 no. You know, Curtis, I'll tell you. I bet you I was making maybe $800 to $900 being assistant varsity coach
Yeah.
for the year,
Yeah.
for the year. And when I left as the head coach, when I gave it up, oh, I think I was making maybe $1,500.
Oh, you used to complain at practice all the time about how much you was. He was like, "I'm getting $4 an hour out here, you guys."
That was just to wake you guys up a little bit.
All right. So then
So in
you was
'75,
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
so in 70, real quick, in '75, we made all the way to city championship game. Banning hadn't been to the playoffs forever, and we made the city championship game, but we lost to a great San Fernando high school team. They had Charles White; he was
Oh,
a
yeah.
fullback, and they had a couple of. They ran a wishbone attack with two halfbacks. And the quarterback was his kid named Moore. All four of them went to SC and
Mm.
were standouts at SC. So we lost in '75, and then after '75, I got elevated to being the offensive coordinator, and then we won a roll. We won 6 straight city championships, and it just the program just caught fire and went on from there. But
So what did the talent coming to the school change, or did the coaching
yes,
change?
no, no, the talent changed, Curtis. The talent changed big time. And don't ask me what it was, but you know, I don't know exactly where you grew up, but you grew up north of the 405 freeway, the
Mm-hmm.
San Diego freeway,
Mm-hmm.
in between Wilmington Avenue and Carson and Avalon.
Yeah, I was between Wilmington and Avalon in between there.
Right.
Yep.
Well, my theory on this was I don't know if there was a small neighborhood
That
like
was
that.
our guys. Raymond Moray, they lived on my block.
Right.
Bryant, they lived on our block. McDonald lived on our block. Trotters lived around the corner. So it was the people in the patch.
See, right. And you know what? We used to talk about all the time saying that area, there couldn't have been a better area in the country, I believe, that produced so many great football players
Mm-hmm.
from Banning and Carson.
Right.
If you take that little area and you count how many guys were going D1 football,
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing, really amazing. But that's what I think changed. The talent changed. It wasn't so much, and I've always believed it. And I'm not trying
So
to be modest.
what year was that? Because I'm trying to think about it. I was born in '72. My parents moved into their house in '74. And then that was, it was probably one other person that lived in that house. So about that time, 75, 76, a lot of other people were probably, because between there and DA is where all that, a lot of that talent was coming from.
Well, our program caught fire right around '75. Freeman McNeil transferred in from Centennial High. We didn't even know who he was. And you know what I think happened is we got to the city championship game and lost in '75. And I think kids start thinking, well, you know what? Maybe Banning is an up and coming program. And we didn't recruit. You couldn't recruit then. You were bound by a boundary. You could never recruit really.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I always root for city schools. City schools, public schools, you got to win with the talent that's basically in your area.
Right.
A parochial school, a Christian school, you can get a kid from anywhere. And I think the program started getting a little success, and the program recruited the players. Players want to start coming there. But Freeman McNeil, for whatever reason, came to Banning from Centennial in '75. '76, he brought a couple other guys. Another guy named Ricky Price and another guy named Jeff Griffin.
So were they able to come because Banning was a magnet school? Like if they lived out of that area, like how were they able to, like, if you know what I mean? How were they
Right.
allowed to come there then?
It was either two ways. Either because when we were a magnet, because we were a magnet school, or B, they were going to Centennial. Maybe they lived in Banning's district and they were going to Centennial.
Oh, okay.
I don't have the right
I
answer for
got
that.
you.
I don't know. And then our program just caught fire after that. And I think two big things. The talent level was just incredible, and the fact that our coaching staff, stayed together. Nobody left. There was no ego amongst our coaching staff. Everybody knew their job, and nobody tried to step on everybody's toes or anything like that. And we put in a lot of hard work. I will say that we worked really hard.
And so y'all won from what? You said y'all won 6 in a row?
We won 6 in a row, eight
Really?
out of 10.
So you
Yeah.
just seen everything change from the number of fans coming to the games
Oh,
to,
geez. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Because you were going there, and from the mid-'70s on, we couldn't have a home game at Banning. We had to play at Gardena High or Vet Stadium or Gardena High School, places like that, because or El Camino Junior College, our campus wouldn't support our turnout, and it just caught fire. Woody Woodson, by the way, our band director,
Mm-hmm.
started in '75, and he just retired. I just went to his retirement this past summer.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Woody Woodson,
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Woodson, yeah. And he turned the band used to have like 30 kids in it, and I think half of them fake playing an instrument. And then he just turned that program around. You remember the band and the
Yeah.
drill team?
So that almost went hand in hand. Y'all started winning. Y'all got a band started.
Exactly.
So what did
Yeah.
it do for the community?
Oh, the community. Wilmington's kind of a unique community. It's a part of the greater Los Angeles area, but the community of Wilmington really identified with the high school, and they really supported the high school. And we used to joke about, if you want to rob a bank or a store, rob it on a Friday night when the Pilots were playing, because if nobody would respond to a burglary. Just had that kind of following. Just amazing.
Right. So then, okay, so then you were the offensive coordinator, and then what did you stayed the whole time Ferragamo was there, or?
I stayed the whole time Ferragamo was there. I got offered other jobs, and a lot of people ask me why I turned other high school jobs down. Because, Curtis, when I was the offensive coordinator, I coached the receivers, quarterbacks, defensive backs, and right, and I got to call all the plays for all those years. And then one of the guys on our staff left to become a longshoreman. He left his teaching job to become a longshoreman. So there was 2 or 3 years where I was the O coordinator and the D coordinator. And I said to myself, why would I want to go anywhere else? I've got a great job. We got a great program. I get to, the only shots I used to ask Ferragamo was, Curtis, it was like a 3rd down and 5, and we were kind of like at midfield. The only thing I'd ask Ferragamo was, hey, do you want to go for it on 4th down if we don't get it right here? Because then that would change my play calling.
Right.
If I knew we had 2 downs, then we might run it the next 2 downs.
Mm-hmm.
If he said no, then I knew we are going to have to throw the ball.
Right.
That was about it.
Right.
So I had the best of both worlds. I loved it, and I was happy at Banning with my teaching position there. The faculty, by the way, was very supportive of athletics. The principal, the administration, it was just a great situation. And I didn't want to go anywhere else. So I stayed there until Ferragamo left to go to Harbor College. And I went with him. I turned down the Banning job. He left, and when he said he was leaving, the principal offered me the job, and I said, no, I want to go to
you know what year that was when he left?
Yeah, after the '86 season.
Okay. So you guys
we were ranked number 1 in the country in '86 in all the United States.
Right.
Yeah. And we lost to Carson in the final. And we beat them big time in the league.
Yeah, that's how it used to be back then. Whoever won that first game, and then it would be number 1 and number 2 and all that stuff. So you guys left in '86 and went to El Camino. You know why y'all left, or?
No, we went to Harbor.
Harbor.
We went to Harbor College, but we just to coach there. We were all still teaching at Banning, but we went to Harbor College to coach. So they hired a different guy at Banning, and he wasn't very successful. So the principal fired him in 1 year. After 1 year. And then he called me in the office and said, if I still wanted my teaching job at Banning, I'd have to come back. Exactly. And that's why I came back and became the head coach. Yeah. And that was probably.
What year was that? Because that had to be like that.
88, I believe. 88.
Well, you must have left again, because I mean, my first year, Hazleton was coaching. Right. And I'm counting my college years. I was in college from 90 to 95. So I was at Banning, I guess, from 87 to 90 then?
So if you played for Hazleton, if you played for Hazelton, then that was the first year of that he was coaching there, and they
Yeah.
fired him after 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
were you a 10th grader then?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So after, and I was coaching at Harbor. So
Okay.
your junior year is probably when I became the head coach,
Right.
probably.
So look, so
Yep.
here's the funny thing, right? So when I always tell people, when we were in, for me, when we were in elementary, I used to dream about playing for the junior high school team. When we was in junior high, you guys, the coaches used to come over. We used to have, I played at Carnegie. We used to have a blue and white game, and the coaches from Carson and Banning would come over and watch us play, even though we was playing flag football. And
Right.
so, all of those years, me and John went to kindergarten, elementary, junior high, and high school together, right?
John who?
John Mai. So
Oh
we
yeah.
we grew up
Okay.
together. We grew up in the same neighborhood. So the funny thing that y'all never knew was all the way up until we got to Banning, I was the quarterback and he played receiver.
I didn't know that.
Nah, all the
I didn't
time.
know
Because I
that.
was, even when we played baseball, I used to strike out about 12 people a game and I was more
Jeez.
accurate. And then and I played, even when they came to watch us play, I played quarterback because I was more accurate than John. And then every once in a while, I would want to go off for a pass, so he would play quarterback and just throw it deep to me. So it was funny when we got the Banning that, I was like, well, I don't really care. But yeah, for our whole life, I was the quarterback and John was the receiver.
Well, I didn't know that. Hey, did Hazelton give you a chance to play quarterback?
Nah, so when I got there, the issue was, so like I said, when we got there, like Bob was only a year ahead of me. And, I came up there in the ninth grade summer when they first met him and Garby had him benching and split his shorts because he had moved to Vallejo, so people didn't know who he was. But even his first year, our teams used to be so good that, everybody played Bs or JVs. So Bob played JVs the first year and got moved up during the playoffs. Me and John, they moved us. They wouldn't let us play Bs. So our first year, they put us on varsity and we wasn't getting on the field. So I was bored and one day I was just kicking the ball from the 50-yard line and I kicked it through the goalpost and Saavedra saw it. And that's when they kind of that was the only way to get on the field to start punting. And, and although I was better at baseball, you the one that ended my baseball career.
Oh
Did you
no.
know that?
No, I
One day
didn't.
I was out there playing, and Saavedra somehow he found out I was playing for a park, and we went 34-0. And they basically they put the whole league formed the all-star team and played against our team, and we beat them. And I was going out to Jackie Robinson Field and playing. So somehow he found out because Oogie's little brother Clay and Augie and them was on my team. And Jamie's dad, Suggs, was coaching. So he found out I played baseball, and he dragged me out to the baseball field. And you stopped me one day. We was right by that gate. You said, son, this is Banning High School. We don't play two sports here. You're going to have to make a choice. You're either going to play football or you're going to play baseball.
You know
and
what?
and that ended my
You know what? And
baseball
that's
career.
that was selfish on my part. And that's not right because you should be able to experience as much as you can in high school.
He was like, we practice every day, son. If you want to play
Yeah.
baseball. So that's what, and so, the funny thing about it almost messed up it put a strain on our relationship with Saavedra because Saavedra was mad that I quit. But I was at Banning and I was like, man, it's really like a decision. I was like, baseball players go either to some camp, but these football players are going D1 and I want to go to college. And
Yes.
and so anyway, that was the funny story. We were standing right outside the building. You caught me. And then another thing that happened, like my 10th grade year, I was playing basketball, summer league basketball. And I tore the ligaments in my knee. I don't know if you knew that in 11th grade.
No.
After you made
No.
me quit playing baseball, I went to play basketball. So the 10th going to the 11th grade, I tore it. And in the 12th grade year, I played the whole year with my ligaments tore. I never missed practice or anything.
Wow.
And that was one of the things when they was recruiting me. Becker was like, you need to sign early because people are asking why you limping around the field. And when I got to Michigan State, after a week of practice, I told them my knee hurt because I didn't have nobody to pay for it. So when they looked at it, I had arthritis, bone on bone, and instead of it being a 3-week thing, I missed the whole season. I redshirted because of that. But yeah, I played my whole 12th grade year. I don't even know if you remember. So the 10th grade year, I couldn't get on the field, so I was punting. 11th grade, I was playing receiver, switching with Lamont Shedrick. And then the
Uh-huh.
12th grade year, I moved to free safety because I saw Paul Montgomery get a scholarship and Eric Wims and all the DBs. And I was like, we don't throw the ball, so I need to go play defense.
Yeah.
That whole year, the summer league, I never played. All I did was punt. I won the whole championship for that passing league, the punting. I won the punting one. And then before the first game, I never played. And Robert Davis was playing safety. He had played that whole summer league. And I remember Barreras was like, man, go out there and play. And I was like, Coach, I don't know what to do. He said, so what? He was like, you halfway better than him. Just go do something. And I never understood the defense, but went out there and played. But yeah, and I think that first game I had about 7 tackles, an interception, and picked up a fumble against Poly. But that was that. Those was those stories, and I was like, man, people never really talked about them. But I played my whole summer, senior year
I didn't
with
know that.
because y'all made us run. I never missed the running or anything.
Well, it was like I said, it was very selfish on our part. I'll be truthful with you. I only got into teaching because I wanted to coach. I was we were so focused in on winning ball games. It's probably not the right thing to do at the high school level, but it kind of came with the territory at Banning. You had to win and be successful and whatnot.
Well, I did want to ask you this. So were other people, watching film like we were? I mean, were other high schools doing that, or where did you guys implement that? Like, I mean, it was just, it was more like Banning wasn't a team; it was a program. Like, where did y'all get that from?
I would probably say there was probably a handful of high schools that were putting in time like us. I don't know if they were putting in the kind of time like us, but I don't know. You probably know, on Friday night we played a game, and on Saturday morning we were watching film of Friday night's game, right?
Yeah, because y'all used to have us come up there on the weekend.
Right, and then on Sunday, on Saturday morning, we'd break down the film from last night's game. But on Sunday, the coaches got together and broke down film on the next week's opponent. And those meetings went from 4 hours to 8 hours to 10 hours. So all day Sunday, we were committed to getting some kind of offensive game plan, defensive game plan, and if we were going to put something new in and stuff like that. So Monday, we were ready to go.
So were you doing that as the offensive coordinator with Ferragamo, or is that something you brought when you started being the head coach, or were you guys already doing that?
No, Ferragamo was already doing that. When I joined the staff, he was already doing that. I will say this. Probably one of the biggest things I got from working with Ferragamo was his work ethic. Nobody was going to outwork him. Not a doubt in my mind, nobody was going to outwork him. And we put in tons and tons and tons of time. And I got that from him. X's and O's a little bit, but the more X's and O's I got was just watching other teams play on film. And if a D1 guy came in the office to recruit one of you guys, I'd always ask him if he had 20 minutes, and I'd give him we always had that little chalkboard in our office. I'd give him the chalk and say, hey, show me some of the best things you guys do and tell me why you do it. Because, I think part of being a good coach is stealing what other people do, what's successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from them. And there's a guy, his son is the head coach at Stanford, John Shaw, who I think should be a pro coach.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad, Will Shaw, was an assistant coach at the time at Arizona State. And I learned so much football from that guy. And every time he came on campus, he'd almost want to run away from me because I'd always ask him to come in the office and say, hey, let's talk a little bit of football. Because, those guys had to go to 8, 9, 10 different high schools during the recruiting period,
right.
See kids and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I need a half an hour or stuff like that. And he was such a good guy to me. And it's no surprising that his son is such a successful football coach.
So then how was it? From the previous years to the number of, I guess you guys just became a destination for every. What's some of the college football coaches that people would recognize that came to visit Banning?
Oh, it'd be better to say what college coaches didn't come to Banning, because in our heyday, John Robinson was our guest speaker at our football banquets a couple of times. Barry Switzer, when he was at Oklahoma, was our guest speaker. We could almost name, we could call a college coach and say, "Hey, we want you to be our guest speaker at our banquet." And most of the time, if their schedule allowed them to, they'd come and speak at our banquet. I gotta believe that from them speaking with them, they always want to be nice to you and say the good things to you, but I gotta believe we had to be one of the top 10 programs consistently for about 10 or 15 years in the country. And I tell a lot of people this, that how now they show high school games on TV every week, and they've always got even nationally on ESPN. Imagine our program if today, if it was with all the notoriety they give high school recruits and stuff like that. They got the Under Armour high school national All American football game, stuff like that. It would have been amazing. But Woody Hayes from Ohio State was at a guest at one of our banquets.
So do you have pictures with all these coaches? Or
Uh,
y'all?
yeah, and I used to keep all that stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'd have to find it to
yeah.
tell you the truth. But it's almost like it was a different lifetime for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I still follow football, and I love
Right.
football. I love
Right.
college football, but I've got it somewhere, I'm sure. When I was first coaching, I was so fired up. I'd put a whole, that in like a little annual yearbook, and then do it the next year and the next year and stuff like that. But my good buddy John Matisich, he's got it all documented.
Right. And Coach, how did y'all go from? I guess if Ferragamo was throwing the ball, like how did y'all get from him to Jamel? I mean, y'all like. I mean, what kind of offense was he running? The option too, or Ferragamo,
No,
or
well, Ferragamo threw the ball when his younger brother Vince was at Banny.
okay,
But when I started coaching in 1973 on the B team, and Ferragamo was the head coach on the varsity, they were running option football. We were already running option football. We were running the veer then. On the B team, we were running the same thing the varsity was.
okay,
So he must have switched. After Vince graduated from Banning, it's probably when he switched. Probably like around 72, 71, 72. He switched to option football,
okay.
and that's what we started running. And we ran it all the way till around 92, 93, something like that.
All right. And then what from I guess from we talked a little bit the other day, but I can imagine how many people that you guys have coached and sent to D1. I mean, that kind of launched out of that program. I think my year we was probably the first class that didn't go to the playoffs, and we still sent about 9 people Division 1 or whatever.
That
What
that was a crazy year. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. What was it that, you weren't getting paid like you should have got paid for the amount of hours and stuff like that? What were some of the things that you were getting joy from, or what kept you going and passionate about it? Like what, we got a chance to play and learn discipline and build camaraderie and just be, kind of, just be around each other and play sports. But for the amount of time as coaches, I'm just wondering, you were still relatively young. What kept you going, and what joy were you getting out of it? And even now, have you followed all of your kids and and kind of get a little bit of joy of them being successful? Or
Absolutely, yeah. But what you telling me that I had an influence on your life. I mean, it really humbles me. But I'm just 100% honest. I was lucky. We used to talk about all the time. We were lucky to be able to work with guys like you. I enjoyed, first of all, coaching high school football keeps you young, number one. But I love the competitiveness of it. I love the reward. You break down some film on Sunday and you put a little game plan together, and you make it work on a Friday night. I love that. Um, I got much more out of it than I think any player ever did. And the guys that I coached with, Ferragamo, Barreras, Garvey, those guys, it was just in Dale Huriyama. It was years later. It was just great. I used to love going to the coaching meetings just to spend the day with those guys. And if we played on a day game and we went out coaching on a Friday night, we'd go out after and go scouting on Friday night. we'd go out and have a pizza and a beer and stuff like that. Just like hanging out. It was just so much fun. And the thing that got me out of coaching, to be honest with you, is that the the kids changed. They were walking out of the varsity football locker room and they see our practice schedule and they see a 4-hour practice schedule and they were in shock over it. What do you mean we're getting off the field at 5:30 or 6? They just changed. They weren't willing to put in the work. And if we got beat on a Friday night, it used to be a quiet bus on the way home. The guys in the back, they're joking around. I couldn't handle that any longer. I just couldn't handle it.
What do you think it was with the? I always wondered. I mean, was it? What do you think that? If you kind of put your finger on or thought about it, like was it like gradual or it just started? You could kind of see it going down, or the
Yeah,
or the kids
it
started changing.
I
I
think
mean,
it
cause,
was
cause
over.
you couldn't even probably coach them as hard as you used to, huh?
No, no, no. I mean, you guys, if you remember, we used to coach and then turn the lights on when it got dark. And then towards the end, the kids would say, "What do you mean it's getting dark and you're turning the lights on?" I think what happened is somewhere along the line, younger people started needing instant gratification. They thought they could be successful not putting in the time. They weren't willing to put in the time. And I always give this example. Let me give you this example. When I first started working at Banning, when I first started working at Banning High School, if you were a teacher, you'd have to volunteer for a track meet. You either had to supervise a high jump event or the pole vault event or help judge the first place winner, second place winner, and third place winner. You had to go out there and volunteer, and I loved doing that. So when I first started at Banning, there were two guys, Tommy Knight and Philip Hubbard. Philip Hubbard. So now I used to volunteer doing the high jump pit during the track meets. Those guys were jumping 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", the two of them. And when I left Banning, high school guys were pole vaulting that.
Mm, wow.
And the difference was the pole vault, you got to put in a lot of time. It's technique, it's work and work and work, and you don't get successful overnight. And kids weren't willing to do that. And the same thing transferred over to football. They just think, well, I was pretty good in Pop Warner. I don't need to practice, and stuff like that. And parents start complaining about, being around all summer to work in the weight room and be involved in passing leagues. It's a combination of that too. Parents didn't want to stay home, have their kids involved in passing leagues. It was a lot of things. And the last thing, as I got older, I think the generation gap started. I didn't relate as well with younger people. I think that might have been part of it also, to be honest.
Okay. And then I remember, I mean, during high school coaching, did you have a lot of interaction with the players' parents?
No,
No.
no. It was very rare for a parent to come to practice. Very rare. If you remember our booster club was very successful and raised a lot of money for the athletic programs. But those were people that lived in the community. They didn't have kids playing in any athletic teams or anything like that. Very rarely did we interact with a parent. Probably the most interaction I ever had with a parent was Stanley Wilson's dad,
Yeah.
and that was very negative. Yeah, but in general, I mean, if a kid got injured, yes, then you'd meet with the parent and maybe advise him, hey, yeah, he should probably go to the doctor, or maybe no, we can probably treat it with ice packs and stuff like that. But very rare where
Yeah,
we
because that's why I
interacted
was
with
thinking
parents.
like the one thing that stands out in my mind, and when you in the middle of stuff, people don't always say stuff. But I remember my parents used to come to the games, but like you said, they never at practice. But I don't remember. I remember one time it just stuck out in my head. Um, it was like I was a third person where I heard you talking about me, and you was talking to my dad. I remember you stood up behind your desk and went to shake his hand, and he was like, "Mr. Daniel, let me tell you about your son. It was an honor to coach him. He's a very pleasurable man, and I just thoroughly enjoyed having him around with his work ethic." And I always like, I mean, you never relationships with coaches are different now. People are friends with their coaches. You know what I mean? Even when I went through college, I never knew what George Perlis was doing or what he did or nothing like that. And even through high school, it was kind of like it was a coach and it was a divide with the players. So, you never would hear that, but that always stuck in my head. I was like, I never knew he thought of me like that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
and then for me it was an honor because my dad worked hard, mom's worked hard too. They've been married now for like 47 years, and for
good for
our
them.
parents then would have to take time and make a sacrifice to be involved in athletics. So I know it he never said anything, but I can imagine as a parent having another person speak about your child like that was real gratifying, man.
Well, looking back on it, it's a shame that now that weren't able to interact more with parents because it's like when we have open house. When I was teaching, I'd get maybe one, two, or three parents come to open house to see how their kid was doing. I didn't need to spend a minute of time with those parents. Their kids were outstanding. That's why they're at open house. But it would have been nice to be able to express our opinion more to parents about what a great young man their son is. Most of the time, that would happen at awards banquets because usually that's the time we would see most of the parents. But even then, we didn't get a chance to interact with the parents too much. That's unfortunate. But you know, I'm sure you did your father proud. And I don't know if you remember this. It was very rare when my dad missed a practice. He'd be at practice almost every day.
Mhm.
There was always, maybe you remember maybe two or three or four or five old guys, sitting on a bench watching practice, and my dad was one of them. And I was always happy to see him there and come to the games to support me and stuff like that. And it's just a shame that more parents aren't active. And maybe that's part of the downfall of our program or our school, because our school academically got started dropping off really severely too. You didn't see parents take any kind of active role in their child, which is kind of sad. But if you tell me that, I'm glad I did. I can't remember everything I did. Kids, you have hundreds of kids a semester. It's hard to remember everybody's name, but I'm glad you brought that up about your father.
Yeah, and then the other thing real quick before we go, I wanted to ask, like, how did I mean, on our teams, we had Bloods and Crips and essays. I mean, how did y'all I mean, was that ever an issue, or did y'all just coast through that and didn't worry about it, or did you guys have discussions about that, or
Curtis, we never brought that up to players. And, now that I think about it, that's another reason why, as the African American student body population dropped off at Banning,
Mhm.
that was a big part of the downfall at Banning because the ethnic balance got one sided. We started having more Hispanic and Black problems when the African American population dropped. It's almost like the Hispanics thought, well, we're in the majority now, and they started harassing Black kids at Banning, and we start losing more and more Black
Yeah,
kids.
that probably started my senior year, because I used to tell people when I went to college, I was like, well, at Banning, if you wasn't over 6 feet, them Hispanic dudes was gonna beat you up in the hallway. You know what I mean? And it
And it
just
started tapering off,
it didn't used to be like that. And yeah, and then people didn't feel welcome, and
right?
so it kind of changed. But I was just when I was telling my other coach, I was like, man, I never really thought about that until high school, because when you felt that tension. But growing up, in Carson, it's black, white, Samoan, Asian, Samoan, Hispanic, just everything. You never really thought about it. But when you got to high school, it did start getting, I mean, I get it. People had pride in their race and stuff like that. But then, people start demeaning other people, and
Right.
it made it uncomfortable for people to
It,
come up there. You know what I mean?
and that was a downfall of the school and also the program. But when you were there and earlier, it was a good mix, a real good mix, and we didn't have the kind of problems. And I'm a firm believer in if you get a high school and your athletic programs are successful, it changes the whole demeanor, the whole outlook of the students and the faculty. The whole complexion of the school changes. And when they're not very successful, then you start having problems. I really believe that. And for a lot of kids going to Banning through the years, athletics probably kept them out of trouble.
Right.
If they weren't on an athletic team, they were down the street, you know, graffitiing or doing whatever.
Right.
But we never addressed that because I think we normally didn't have those kind of problems. Plus, a big part of it, we used to have lunch meetings with a lot of, with the team a lot of time during lunch, and keep them out of that lunch area and that riffraff and stuff like that. And that was probably one of the main reasons why we did it, so we didn't have any kind of fight or problem at lunchtime.
All right. So do you know, as one of your former player, do you know what story you're most famous for?
As a coach,
Yeah. Do you know
uh,
your the number one Dominguez speech that we all joke about?
no, no. I see a guy a lot that played on the '78 and '79 team that gets on my case about me picking on him a lot during a game.
Well, I'm I'm
But
I'm I'm
no,
gonna tell you your
you
most
tell
your
me.
most famous. We
You tell me.
come in at halftime. You know what, guys? I've seen a lot of things in my life. And you know what you guys are? You guys are world shit. You know what sits down at the bottom of the ocean beneath the ground is whale shit. And that's what you guys are. You guys aren't dog shit. You aren't cow shit. You guys are a bunch of whale shit. And you walked out.
you know, were we winning or losing at that time?
We was struggling at halftime, but we ended up winning the game. But you just left after that. Everybody looked
You,
around. I talked to Eric Battle yesterday, and he's like, man, I don't care what none of my coaches ever said to me in my life. I could never be lower than whale shit. So,
you know, if I was coaching today and said that, and the administration found out, I'd get fired.
now, did you
Oh
use
man.
that often, or you just happened to say it at that time?
No, I probably used it a couple of times, but I probably did a lot of things that I'm not proud of. Oh man, I'll tell you a real quick one is this kid named Tony Guzman was our center on our 78 team. He was a junior. He was a backup, and the starting center got his butt kicked in the league game versus Carson. Just got his butt kicked, right? And we lost that game. So now, 4, 5, 6 weeks later, we're playing the city championship game against Carson. First play of the game, our center goes down, and I think he didn't want to get his butt kicked again. So we put in this skinny center, Tony Guzman. He's a
Is this
junior.
Tony that coached with y'all later on?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we put Tony in. He's all shook up. He wasn't thinking about playing, and he did a pretty decent job. And we won the city championship. So we fast forward a year later, and during the first half, Tony Guzman goes down with an injury. Now, as a coach, your kids that are really hurt, and the ones are hurt because the scoreboard is telling them they're hurt.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're losing, or it's a tough game, or something like that. So Tony Guzman goes down. And I'm up, I never was, very rarely was I on the field. I was always up in the press box calling the plays. So at halftime, I get right in Tony's face as best I could. He's about 6'3" and I'm 5'7". I get in his face and I tell him, "You better." And the kid that played the year before, his last name was Alepi, Frank Alepi.
Mm-hmm.
So I get in his face and I tell him, "You better not pull a effing Alepi right now. You're playing. I don't care if you got to drag that leg around the next 2 quarters." I just got in his face about it, and he tells that story. And I see him quite often. He tells that story to everybody, and he tells them, "I wanted to kick Dominguez's butt so bad, but he sucked it up and played the game." And you knew what kind of kids you could say that to, and you knew some other kids that would just crawl into a shell. You know what I
Right.
mean
Yeah.
about it? But I do remember telling the guys a couple of times that they were whale shit. Oh man, I hope we won that game.
Yeah, we won. I mean, it was a day game too. We just was playing bad, and you just came in, and that you didn't even coach at halftime. That's all you said, and walked out, and we went out and won.
Well, I'll give you one more story. I don't know how much time you got, but the story that the guys that coach with me always tell about me, the craziest story they tell about me is we went up to see Granada Hills. We were scrimmaging. We must play a day game that day. We went up to watch Granada Hills play. We went to go scout them. Granada Hills. And Carson was playing Kennedy, or vice versa, to tell you the truth, vice versa. And they were playing out in the valley. So we drove out the valley to watch Granada Hills scrimmage, and we were taking notes. So I said, "Hey guys, let's drive by Kennedy to see the score, Carson versus Kennedy." And there was 6 of us in the car, all the coaches, and we're driving over there. And they're all saying, "No, let's not get off the freeway. Let's just get home. It's late. Let's get home." I said, "No, let's go by there." And they said, Carson beat Kennedy." And I said, "I'll tell you what, if we go by the stadium and Carson lost to Kennedy, I'm going to get out in the street and I'll do a backflip right there as people are leaving the stadium." So we drove by the stadium and you could see the scoreboard, and Carson got upset. So I ran out in the street, hundreds of people going out of the stadium. I did a backflip right there. Got back in the car and we went home. Yeah, but they always talk about that. We did some crazy things, but gotta have some great times.
Now
Really,
let me
really
ask
some
you one
great
more
times.
thing. So then you played and then you coached. Um, what did you what fulfilled that that void, or was there one, or you just were kind of done? I mean,
I was done.
because it was like I remember with you, it was like it was either all or nothing. You know, when it was like Dominguez is done, I said, "Oh, he done." You know what I mean? Because I don't know. I always thought I was like, man, he probably got burnt out because he went hard, and in my mind, it seemed like you guys at one point did care more than the kids, and I always thought I was like, he the type of person that if he look around and he wants it more than all these other people, he's gonna say it ain't worth it because he used to always be out there talking about, man, I'm not getting paid for this. You know what I mean? So,
Yep.
so I just always wondered, how you cut that off and just walked away, and it's almost like it's a whole program that you guys built, and then to watch it kind of crumble. And I would imagine you had some feelings like, I know how to fix this, but you just stayed away.
I couldn't. Honest, I couldn't deal with the losses. Even if my last year I coached. The last year I coached, we went 13-1. We were ranked number one in the state. We lost the championship game to Dorsey High, 33-30, and I couldn't deal with the loss. And the year before, we lost 1 or 2 games. I couldn't deal with the losses, and it was ruined my weekend. I'd come home on Saturday, come home Friday night. I'd go outside, get the newspaper to read the newspaper on Saturday morning. I'd meet with the players, like we used to do on Saturday mornings. Come back home, and then I'd meet with the coaches on Sunday morning to get a game plan for the following week. Come back home. It would ruin my weekend and ruin the whole week. I never could balance out the losses. You know what? The high of winning wasn't high enough to balance out the loss, the low of losing. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So your last year you went 13-1 and you lost. The only game you lost was the championship by 3 points, and you walked away.
Yeah, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. It cost us too much. State championship, we were maybe 3, 4, 5 in the country, and I couldn't deal with it. I didn't know how to deal with
So y'all,
it.
if you would have stayed, y'all would have kept winning.
I think so. I think so. I think we would have continued to be successful because that's our the staff when you played. We stayed together. Uh, we would have been successful. Oh yeah, we'd have kept winning for
So
sure.
was everybody else cool with your decision on the coaching staff? Were they like,
No,
you know?
no, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think so. But I just it was tearing me up. And I came back and coached about. They hired a guy after me, Pacuba, became the head coach. Wasn't very good, and they cut him loose. And then they hired another guy who went 0-10. He went 0-10 about 5 years after I got out. So the principal, I don't know if she might have been the head of the attendance office or the counselor's office when you were there. You remember a woman named Mrs. Lamoth,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
a black lady?
Yep.
Man, a super lady, super. Well, she became the principal, and Banning gone 0-10. And don't ask me what year it was.
All right.
So she came out and asked me if I'd do her a favor and come and coach and kind of get the program running again until she could find somebody. And I told her, Mrs. Lamoth, I'll do it for a year, and maybe we can get it changed around, get it going in the right direction. But you got to find somebody. But in a year, I might say, hey, I want to stay, or I might say I want to go. And she said, fair enough. So I did come back and coach 1 year, and we went 0-10 the previous year. We went 9-3 that year that I came back and coached, but it just wasn't the same. It just wasn't the same. So, and I'm going to say that was somewhere in the 90s,
But
Curtis.
I mean, my question and fascination is how do you, like I said, you built it, right? And then not only you didn't really walk away, but you still teaching there.
It
So
was
how
hard.
do you like walk past the football field? How do you? I mean, all
It
on
was
like you
hard.
said when you was in junior high, you used to jump the fence, watch practice. You was the water boy, but you literally was. It's like getting a divorce from your wife and living in the same house. Like you literally
Exactly.
at
Yeah,
Banning.
yeah.
Like how did you? I mean, how do you just stayed away from like your office was off the football field? So what do you do?
No,
You just
I'd walk across the football field where they're practicing and go to the teacher's parking lot where my car was parked, and I'd leave. I'd stand there and watch a couple of minutes, but bail, and all the guys that coached after that, they'd offer me an assistant job to coach with them, but I just didn't have it in me.
right.
I did, I didn't have it, and it hurt, especially it hurt to see the program start to go down. But I just it hurt a little bit every day, so to speak. And I just figured I can handle those little cuts and wounds, but I couldn't handle a Friday night loss. I couldn't handle that. But when I retired from teaching in 2008, I was in June of 2008. The the spring before my last year of teaching, uh, Ferragamo was the head coach again. He took over the coaching job again. I think he took it over around '05, and they were struggling. So he was doing everything he could to get the program going, and he broke a couple of rules. So they suspended him for the first 2 or 3 games of the '07 season. And he had a young staff, mainly walk on guys and stuff like that. So it was during the spring of '07, the year before I retired. And he sat me down. I talked with him, and he said, "Hey, I got to ask a big, big favor of you." And I said, "What's that?" He goes, "I need you to help me coach. I'm suspended for the first 2 or 3 games of your year." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I did. I don't know what he did." So I told him, "Okay, look," and he kind of helped me get involved in coaching. So I figured, well, it's my last year. I started teaching 31 years ago. Coaching, I'm going to leave coaching. So I said, okay, I'm going to spend spring football with you that semester, the spring semester of '07. If I like it and I like the kids, I'll stay on. If I don't, I'm bailing. So I stayed on, and it was a pretty good group of kids. So I coached that last year in '08. It was a good bunch of kids and all that. And I had a good time. As an offensive coordinator, I coached the same thing: receivers, quarterbacks, and DBs, and we had a good time. And we went 9-3. We lost second round of the playoffs, but I had a good time. But I'll end it with this: I I I am considering going and volunteering at a high school somewhere and get involved a little bit as a volunteer assistant. I think I can handle that.
Right.
But to be a head coach, I'll put in all the time, year-round time, and all that. Just
Well, you
it's
don't
hard to
know
do.
how to halfway do it.
That's hard to do. Yes, yes, it's hard to do that. And some coaches I talked to said they can deal with losses, and I couldn't do it. I just think that if it's easy for you to lose, I don't know if you're a good coach Monday through Friday. If you can bounce back from a loss, but guys do it. College coaches do it. Pro coaches do it. Everybody does it. You can't coach without getting beat. You're going to get beat. You're going to get your butt kicked here once in a while too. But I couldn't do it. Maybe now I could do it. I don't know.
And that
I don't
last
know.
question, coach. So when y'all went to Harbor College, I mean, was there I mean, did they recruit y'all? Did you ever have an opportunity to go? I mean, now it's high school coaches that are head coaches at Auburn and stuff like that. And if you look at all the success that you guys had, did you guys have the opportunity to go coach at a D1, or did you not take that opportunity, or you just did you enjoy coaching high school kids, or
I wouldn't have hesitated 10 seconds to be an assistant D1 coach.
you said you
Even
would
if
have or you wouldn't
I
have?
I would have jumped on it right off the bat because that year I coached at Harbor, that was my goal. I wanted to move on, so I was taking night classes and got my master's degree because I wanted to teach. I figure I'll get a JC job somewhere, and I can teach there with my master's, and maybe I can have a little bit of success, and maybe catch on with a D1 school. But it never came about. One of the head coach at New Mexico or New Mexico State was coming to our practices and recruiting players for for a few number of years, and he asked me to send him a resume, and I did, and nothing came about from it, and I never did it again. I never sent a resume like that to anyone else again.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, uh, but it's probably it's not their fault. I think it's my fault. I don't know if I ever had that much confidence if I could have been a D1 assistant. I don't know. I don't know. I have got a real good
I mean,
buddy.
you could. I mean, I played D1. Shit, you could have did it. You know what I mean? And then
You think so, huh?
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, we were prepared. I mean, the craziest thing about when I got to Michigan State, it was two statements that I made to myself. One, I was like, man, I got cheated on because I tested bad, and I was like, shit, they didn't prepare me for college academically, but as far as football, going through the two-a-days, watching film of, hey, here's what we did, here was our mistakes, and then here's the film of our opponent, and this is what our goals are to go out and practice, and this is what we're going to work on. We were over prepared compared to the other kids that were coming in there.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, yeah, we was ahead of the game. It was like when we would sit around and talk about our high school and what we did and what type of programs and stuff like that. People didn't have that. Like I'll say this last thing. One of the things that, like, when I remember, you had to be coaching when Brett Young came through Banning, and
Yes.
Brett went to Oregon, and
You're
for
right.
whatever reason, I remember when I was in junior high, I kept saying, "Man, I don't care if," this was my analogy. I said, "I don't care if Jesus and the seven disciples come down and recruit me to go. I want to go to Oregon because I just love I love the logo, right?" And
Uh
then
huh.
I wasn't worried about anything, and then when the senior year came, they recruited me, and that was my best trip. I went there.
Wow.
They had the locker with my name on it. They had my jersey name on the scoreboard. They begged me to come there, said I was going to play there. And I think I took a trip to Iowa State because Andrew was there, Bugs, and then I went to Michigan State, which I didn't even know where it was on the map because I
Uh
guess Becker
huh.
happened to be from Michigan, and he
Yep.
was
You're
pushing
right.
that. And so I always tell people when they would ask me, like, years later, you know, like my senior year, I was like, man, we didn't even practice in the rain. Shit, we would go inside, and I wasn't ready for that shit in Michigan, and it was cold, and I thought that we wouldn't have to go to school or anything. And they would be like, they always thought I was the dummy. I was Perlis's first recruit from California in 7 years. And as I got older, when I went on that recruiting trip, when I went in his office, he didn't even know my name. The
Wow.
head coach didn't know my name, and the dude that recruited me, he had went to SC, Pat Morris, and he was like, "Oh, he really wants you, this." And when I think back on it, I always say, man, I went there because, I'm a young kid. My parents weren't involved in that process, and I was probably more impressionable because Becker would be like, Big Ten, look at these wins. And then, the funny
Yeah.
thing, I never talked to Becker, nothing like that. And when I started thinking, I said, man, he probably got paid to send me to Michigan State. And when I went there, it was my worst trip.
Oh,
The students were on, because we went to the playoffs, so it was winter. The whole school was on winter break, so no kids were there, and it was
jeez.
snowing. And I remember I was walking on a frozen lake, and I was like, I ain't never going here. And somehow I ended up going there, and
You
I
ended up
tried
at
to,
one.
yeah, I tried to transfer. But one of the things that I'm thankful for is, I had the knee surgery, and then at the end of my second year, I was probably going to play, and I ended up messing up my neck. I had a spinal injury. So I ended up with a narrowing between C3 and C4, and they caught it, and they told me I was one hit away from being paralyzed on my whole
Oh,
left
jeez.
side. So I always think that, man, if I would have went to Oregon, I would have played, and I probably would be handicapped. And
Yep.
I tried to transfer, and the coach called my parents and said, because when we first got to Michigan State, we played 2 games before the students came because we were on quarters. And he was like,
Uh
he's
huh.
not supposed to like it. All we doing is practicing. I'll tell you this deal. If when the students come on here after the second semester, he still don't like it, we'll let him transfer. And when the people came, whatever. But yeah, I don't, till this day. I mean, when I think about it, I was like, I never even knew where Michigan was on the map.
Gee.
And when my
Wow.
nephew came through, he went to Arizona, and I went on a recruiting trip, and I was kind of more involved. And I remember one day my mom pulled me to the side and she was just like, "We blessed that you helping them." And she's like, "But the thing that it shows me is how absent we were as parents because they never came to Michigan State until I graduated after my 5th year." And one of the things I always tell people that I noticed was that when the coaches in college, when the parents were standing on the sideline or went to talk to them, those kids would, they would be like, "Hey, why my son not playing?" And they would put him on kickoff. I was out there, kid, without,
Uh-huh.
the high school coaches didn't have a relationship with the program, and my parents, they weren't no threat, no relatives of them coming. So I just was out there. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like
Yeah.
it was weird when we left. I'm sure it would have been different if I went to a school in California and, like, cause I would have people, teammates, when they have problems, they high school coaches would come up there and talk to the thing. And next thing you know, they on kickoff return. You know what I mean? So it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, but yeah, it was crazy going out there, man. I mean,
Jeez. Well, it was probably a blessing because they caught that situation you had with your spinal cord and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
That's a blessing.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah,
Uh,
again, Coach, let me put a button on it. Just tell you thank you. I'm glad I caught up with you, and I'm glad I got to actually tell you, what, kind of like I said, what impact and just say thank you for taking all that time out and working with all of us. You know what I mean?
well, Chris, I want to thank you because the pleasure was more mine. Believe me, I love seeing the guys that played for us, and that was the best time of my life. It really was. And let me say this: if you're in California, come down to Southern California, give me a buzz.
I'll
Let's
be
get
there. I'm
together.
I'm I'm coming for Christmas. I'll be there on the
All
23rd. I
right,
got your
really?
number now. Yeah, and so I'll call you. I mean, we'll talk again before then, but I'll be there. Well, I'll be me and my wife and my daughter are coming, so we coming on the I think we come in on the 22nd or the 23rd.
Oh, good. And you know what? If you know how to get a hold of some of the other guys, let's get together and let's go out to dinner or something like that. How's that
Yeah,
sound?
I definitely do. Every time I come home, I have a party because I always want to see everybody. Last time
Oh, good.
I had one in Long Beach. It was over. I did a Banning Carson party, and it was over 400 people came. I don't do it that big no more, but I'm gonna put a group of people together and let them know that I talked to you, and we're gonna go to dinner. And it would be good to see some of the other coaches too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Well, I can get a hold of Huriyama, Barreras, Garby, and all those guys. I see them occasionally.
yeah. I'd
I
like
see
to
them.
talk to Coach Dale. Yeah, if you can shoot me his number, I'd love.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll do that. I
Okay.
absolutely will do that. Yeah, he's doing real good. You know, for about 10 years, his wife worked in the SC's football office.
Nah, I didn't
And
know
SC.
that.
Yeah, yeah, they're really nice people. But I'll get you his phone number, and
Okay.
you make sure you get a hold of me come Christmas time. We'll get together if you're in California. All right?
Okay. All right, Coach. Thanks again. All right.
I
All right.
thank you.
All right.
Really nice visiting with you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.